There! Hold on! Go!
Welcome to the review of The Last of Us Remastered. The original game was released in 2013 and the remastered version in 2014. This review does not contain any spoilers at all, and admittedly that made it difficult for me to make this review since the game is so story-driven. The primary differences between the original and the remastered is that the original is only available on PS3, whereas the remastered is available on PS4 and PS5. The original is 720p, and the remastered is 1080p with 60 frames per second option. Additional items in the remastered version are better graphics, a photo mode, and the downloadable content called The Last of Us Left Behind, which is now available from within the game directly. Going over the plot, the game takes place in the USA and starts with a fast-paced introduction to the world going into chaos. A fungus has started to infect humans, turning them into almost zombie-like beings with violent tendencies and sometimes cannibalistic tendencies. The game fast-forwards 20 years later after the fungus starts to spread and focuses primarily on Joel. He doesn't have much to live for as most people he cares about have left him and the world is going to ruin, with him living in a lockdown militarized zone. Anyone caught with the infection is immediately killed. Joel operates as a mercenary, doing shady jobs to procure weapons and food stamps. The plot really starts to pick up as Joel is approached by the Fireflies for a delivery job. The Fireflies is an anti-government rebellion group opposed to the lockdown areas. It's revealed that Joel's delivery job is to escort a teenager, Ellie, to a Fireflies base. My plot overview is simple because getting into further detail about the story would contain spoilers. One thing I can mention is that the game is incredibly suspenseful. I played the entire game while on my recliner seat, but I realized that often I was leaning forward because the game's ability to engross me into the game's story and world was done incredibly well. It's not just the infected humans that make the game suspenseful, it's actually regular humans. The game does an incredible job of showing how humans are the only true evil beings on planet Earth. The game basically shows that humans are the worst monsters alive. The other incredible element of the story is the relationship between Joel and Ellie. Joel's trust issues and haunted past are the source of a lot of drama that occurs between them, while Ellie is just a kid trying to find her place in this world of chaos. Their extreme opposite personalities are some of the most important and fundamental elements of the story, which are played out beautifully. This game should take you about 15 hours to complete. As mentioned earlier, there are two main characters to the game, Joel and Ellie. Joel is tough, harsh, old, and tired. As the game plays out, we come to learn that Joel has experienced enough in his life which makes the gamer wonder, why does he even want to live anymore? Every time he speaks, he sounds constantly exhausted, and rightfully so. He's seen and done many regrettable things in his life and has been forced to continue doing similar actions to simply stay alive. Despite all this, the game does an amazing job of making the gamer feel sympathy for him. Ellie's character is a refreshing take on a strong female lead. Although she's a young teenager, she shows moments of strength that would make regular adults tremble. The most interesting thing about her character is how fascinated she is of the past, before the fungus spread. She doesn't know what video games are, she doesn't know what it's like to check into a hotel, and so on. Throughout the game, she asks about the world before it went into ruin, which is an interesting spin on her character. While the game focuses mainly on Joel and Ellie, there's no shortage of side characters. Each one has a very unique personality and a different way of dealing with the current state of the world. While side characters don't get a backstory recap, just the interaction and dialogue with them gives an overview of what they're like. The same can be said about human enemies. Not much is known about them, and some are shrouded in mystery, but in short interactions with them, you get almost a complete picture of what they're like as a human being. Switching to combat, you start off weak with minimal weapons. However, the main objective of the game is using stealth when possible. Your character will have a listening skill to get a rough idea where enemies are behind a wall. This is important because weapons and bullets are a scarce resource. You can certainly use weapons if you have enough ammo, but at times it can backfire as you'll be surrounded by more enemies than you'll be able to handle. In fact, the game recommends running and hiding if you get overwhelmed. Combat is overall tough, whether you're shooting, using melee, or trying to be stealthy. The game wants you to be smart about how you approach scenarios. You can even use pick up and throw items like bricks and bottles to distract enemies and slip past them, but in some cases combat is unavoidable. There are two types of enemies, humans and infected. Each species has different types of enemies. For instance, there are melee combat types, others with guns, others with military grade weapons, and so on. As the game progresses, your character becomes stronger, but so do enemies, and new types of enemies appear. Keep in mind that your character will die. A lot. That's because this game is tough. But don't be discouraged to play it since checkpoints are rather generous, and of course there is a difficulty mode to choose from. I did encounter one game issue that took me by surprise. I won't get into too much detail to prevent spoilers, but in one of the hardest and later levels of the game bugged out on me big time. Random enemies turned invisible and killed my character. Except that wasn't the thing that disappointed me. When my character died, they respawned to a checkpoint forward in the level instead of the last checkpoint that I had passed. Thankfully, nothing in the game's story was ruined for me, but it's a bit off-putting these two bugs occurred, thus stealing my sense of accomplishment to completing one of the toughest levels on my own. There are two upgrade systems, one for your character and another for weapons. Both are pivotal to invest into. It's a really easy to use system. For character development, just find meds throughout your journey and you can upgrade different types of skills. For weapon upgrades, just pick up tools and parts and you can upgrade weapons with the click of a button. My tip is to invest in the Shiv skill ASAP. Trust me, it'll make some of the tough scenarios much easier to deal with, you'll thank me. There's also a crafting system. Thankfully, it isn't complicated like some RPGs, and crafting items is quite easy. As mentioned earlier, the game takes place throughout multiple parts of the US. Some levels a decayed city, others in creepy underground tunnels, and some in beautiful areas. This is not an open world game as the path for your character to follow is rather linear, but most combat areas allow you to move between buildings and be creative during combat. It's hard to believe this is a remastered game from 2014 as I review this here in 2022. Even by today's standards, it's one of the best looking console games. Probably one of the most underappreciated aspects of the games is character facial animation. Since characters' emotions is an important part of the storytelling, the animations do great justice to literally show emotion. Cutscenes are a mix between in-game graphics and pre-recorded videos. To be honest, at times it's tough to tell the difference between the two as both look gorgeous. There's not much in terms of side quests. Anything aside of the main game is more about finding hidden collectibles or cache of supplies. There are a ton of handwritten letters sprout throughout the game in abandoned homes. They're not important to the story, but they add a nice touch of lost hope in this chaotic world from other non-existent characters. The star of this game is the campaign, which easily overshadows the multiplayer element, but that doesn't mean multiplayer is bad. Multiplayer has a strange twist that you have survivors following you during the outbreak, and during multiplayer matches, you collect supplies to help your survivors. This isn't too important, but is one of the reasons to make you do more multiplayer matches. There are three types of matches: Supply Raid, which is simply open combat in which you must kill the opposing team; Survivors is the last person standing per round; and Interrogation, in which you must beat opposing players to interrogate them into revealing their location of their safe full of supplies, which you must then try to open. Switching to sound, primarily for campaign mode, the soundtrack is incredible. It plays a perfect unsettling score when hope is minimal, and a lighter tone when things finally calm down. It never becomes overbearing though. It's always done perfectly in the background in a lowered volume to set the right atmosphere. One of the best things about sound is the voice acting. The popular Troy Baker playing the part of Joel is done superb. To be honest, I didn't realize it was Troy until the credits. Ashley Johnson does amazing work by voicing Ellie.
You decided to run up and join the Firefly, is that it?
Look, I'm not supposed to tell you why you're smuggling me, if that's what you're getting at.
You wanna know the best thing about my job? I don't gotta know why. To be honest with you, I give two shits what you're up to.
Watching the game's behind the scenes development, it probably helped that they did a lot of acting in person together when capturing CGI motion, and then audio in a recording studio. There was one off-putting thing about sound. While I was surrounded by infected and being stealthy, Ellie would randomly start whistling loud. This is a running joke throughout the game as she's trying to learn how to whistle. The problem is that these practice sessions of Ellie's occur at the worst time, breaking the tension of a suspenseful part of the game. Sometimes the whistling is so loud I thought an enemy is closer than I thought.
Are you alright?
I'm trying to learn how to whistle.
Voice acting from side characters is also spot on, whether the side character has a lengthy role in the story or a short one. A lot of care was done into making the voices sound great and also ensuring that the acting was top notch. Infected enemies also sound great, from runners behaving and sounding like mindless zombies to the more creepy clicker, which makes the most terrifying sound. But again, I don't want to show that until you play the game yourself. It's rather easy to say that this is one of the greatest games made of all time, and for good reason. It's not just the gameplay that's done well when it comes to combat mechanics, graphics, and all that good stuff. It's the story and the acting. It's just like watching a movie. Better than movies, in fact. This is almost a perfect game except for Ellie's random whistling at really odd times, which broke all tension, and it kind of made me wonder if an enemy was closer than I thought. And the biggest thing for me also is when my character respawned forward into the game, kind of ruining all the tension and suspense. If you haven't already, do yourself a favor and you must play this game. It's one of the greatest ever made.